My name is Tony Vu. I'm a chef entrepreneur with a big passion to leverage the power of food for social impact. Founder, chef of MaMang in Flint, Michigan. Also executive chef and co-founder of The Good Bowl in Traverse City. And I'm the founder and executive director of Flint Social Club, a capacity building program for marginalized people in the food industry.
Welcome to The Vietnamese. I'm your host, Kenneth Nguyen. Being part of a culture of nearly 100 million Vietnamese people in the world today comes with a lot of pain, proud history, and privilege. Join me as I highlight and explore the Vietnamese experience from all over the world.
Thank you, Tony. What does it mean to be Vietnamese to you nowadays?
Being happy-go-lucky. I think when I think of Vietnamese people and what makes me feel at home and feel really connected, there is just this undeniable happy-go-luckiness, I guess, about us and our ways. Particularly coming from, a history of, strife and coming from war and rebuilding and everything. Some of the most impactful kind of relationships and interactions that I've had have come through knowing these stories of struggle and everything, but throughout it all, just always maintaining this sort of positivity and optimism and just kind of, human connection throughout it all. At the end of the day, there's always some kind of smile, some kind of willingness to share, and a lot of just really beautiful community relations in it all. So to me, that's what being Vietnamese comes down to.
It's an interesting answer, happy-go-lucky, because, I haven't heard that yet since all of my time doing this, happy-go-lucky. And I want to sort of spotlight your family before we get into the growing up part of it. Your family is, starting with Bác Lê Xuân Khoa and Lê Quỳnh and Ilan and Cô Thái Thanh, well, she's an in-law, and Mimi Vu. All of these people are people that I've come into contact with in my life or have, read or have known extensively about. And when I think about those people, I do kind of get this sense of happy-go-lucky. They seem like very positive people. Do you think that that's something to do with the family culture?
I think so. And maybe that's what being Vietnamese, or that's what it means to be Vietnamese to me. I have an awesome family. And, even if we don't see each other for years or anything, just being able to come back and just just joke with each other and poke fun and just kind of, connect in these really, just happy spaces. It's really, really amazing. And it's something that I think, through my lens, growing up without much of a Vietnamese community surrounding me, to kind of have that connection to them and have that perspective of how I've experienced, my kind of, identity and growing into my identity as a Vietnamese person. It's provided a really awesome kind of backdrop to seek out, who I am.
So you didn't grow up around a lot of Vietnamese people?
No, not at all. So I grew up in a tiny farm town called Millington with a population of, I think it was 2,000 people or something like that. It's it had one traffic light. Everybody knew us. So I apologize. I got my dog beat. It was a really small farm town. So, the story is that my family came over from the war. My dad, through his military contacts, ultimately ended up in Flint, Michigan to do his residency at a hospital. And that's where I was born. And from that program, the town of Millington basically adopted my family. And so we ended up relocating there. My father was set up with a medical practice. And that's where I spent the first 15 years of my life. This kind of small town community. I wouldn't say I was completely disconnected by any means. That was obviously my everyday life, but I was also really lucky in that, my parents did maintain their connections to the community and friends and family and everything. And so I was able to travel a lot. We spent a lot of time in Houston, spent a lot of time, traveling out to California, where a lot of my relatives are. My father's side of family is in Paris as well, and so I wasn't devoid of the culture by any means, but yeah, very very much so. I was raised in a town where we were the only non-white family.
And
So
what did you expect yourself to do as you were growing up for the future?
it was pretty typical. I was obsessed with being a doctor. I
Oh,
wanted
wow.
to be a surgeon, and it was pretty much a one track kind of thing. It wasn't anything that was asking me or anything too. I just I guess I just really wanted to do it. And I'll never forget it. I remember my father sitting down with me at some point, like maybe he was like eighth grade or ninth grade or something. And he kind of had the talk with me of like, what I wanted to do, like what direction, everything in life. And, I told him I wanted to be a doctor, and he basically convinced me not to
Oh,
pursue it.
shit.
Yeah.
Really?
And looking back, I totally get it now as well, because, I think where he came from and, how he was a doctor, it was just completely different in the American healthcare system. And it was just more of like this kind of business and grind and things like that. I think in a way, like he actually really enjoyed being in Millington, because he just became a straight up like, country doctor, like doing house visits and like, exchanging his medical services for like, milk and like, all these like cool like bargain or like barter system kind of stuff. Um, but but yeah, I think in the end, he what he told me was that he knew that I had a really good heart, that I really wanted to help people, but in the end, that he didn't think that that was going to be the right field for me.
Okay, so what's the reason you think he said that? What was his assessment?
I don't know. My father and I, like, so he came from a very very kind of stern and disciplined family. My grandfather was a schoolmaster. It was just, they were just very 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 much the opposite of the lay side of the family,
Yeah,
which is,
rigid.
yeah, very rigid. And so you know I think part of it was just him assessing and seeing me throughout life, and just maybe seeing what, that maybe there was something else out there for me. Um, Maybe also not wanting to like, to not wanting me to just follow in his footsteps just because that was what I was supposed to do. Because everybody else, I'm pretty much that whole side of the family is all full of doctors as well.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's a really good question. I'm not really certain. Other than it was just kind of maybe that personal connection between father and son, and what he saw, where he saw my potential was.
Yeah, because if you think about it, looking back today, that's pretty progressive for that time. For
Yeah,
anybody to tell your kid, especially if your kid wants to do it, and to tell
yeah,
your kid, look, that my opinion is don't do it,
yeah.
very progressive way of looking at career.
Yeah, and I think he definitely saw my innate talents with like math and science and computers, and like my interests in all those as well. Like we were the first family to have a computer in the entire like town, and so I took to technology at a very young age, and so I think probably also with that and seeing that he did say that I think maybe you should get into into computer science or technology and things like that as well. So I think he was kind of assessing things with not only just myself, my personality, but then maybe just how the world was kind of shaping up as well.
Yeah. And and how the world was shaping up and what you have ultimately decided to do is not computers and not technology and not science. It's very different. It's community and it's food and it's very things that are much more human based. Your journey into to all of these things of, and we'll get into it. The music and going down to live in
Yeah.
South America and all of that stuff. Very different um, from what it sounds like you're heading into.
Yeah, I think that was the unintended consequence of that conversation, because I was always good at computers, and I was interested, but I never really was passionate about that at all. And so ultimately, from that conversation, obviously over the course of the years as well, like I definitely stuck into more of the creative side of things, and ended up, um, you know, dedicating about 15 years of my life after that to being a musician and doing music.
What did you want to do as a musician?
Oh man, so this is gonna take you back to just being like a young, just like hopeful, like like I wanted to change the world with music, basically. Excuse me, one second. I'm gonna.
Okay.
So yeah, basically, I wanted to, in my mind, change or save the world. It was like, I was like full of just, energy and like optimism. And like, it was, especially like in my upbringing and everything going through high school and stuff, it was like me against like the man, and like, seeing all the injustices in the world with like, corporations. And like, I got really deep into just like, this kind of sense of like, I guess almost like activism of sorts, of like, trying to change people's perspectives and minds and everything, and really, tapping into the power of music and creativity to be able to get these messages and everything across.
But why music? Why did you think music would be a channel to change things in the world?
Um, I think that was probably just based off of my life experience. I had always played music. So I started drumming when I was 8 years old. So that was always something that was just like really strong in me. Never in the beginning did I ever think that it was going to be a career or anything like that. But I think as I kind of, maybe the focus of being a doctor and living this other, building this other life started to fade. It was filled with, this excitement of creativity. And, as I kind of delved into more of that path, like it's just started to open up all these different, opportunities and relationships that ultimately just ended up, just kind of like growing me into these kinds of mindsets. And obviously a big part of it too is like, going through high school, going through puberty, like, all the high school, kind of things that one goes through. With like, particularly for me, with like identity and things like that as well. It was just this really amazing place for me to not only explore myself, but then also express myself in a way where I could be free and be authentic.
Got it. And then so you get into drumming, and this is the first step of the music process for you. What do you do with it?
So I went through just kind of like schooling and everything, and band classes and things like that. And then when I went to high school, I ended up coming to Flint to go to a private school. And I was very, very much out of place there. I didn't know anybody. I was this like scrawny, like Asian kid that was like super shy and everything as well. And so, it was through music. I remember like sitting down at the lunch table, and like somehow somebody had found out that I played music. I should remember good friend Brent Dutcher. So he came to me and like was asking me, and he's like, "Oh, so you're a drummer?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, I play bass." And then next thing you know, you're making friends, and you're every day after school, you're going to somebody else's basement to start jamming and everything. And so that kind of like started the path. And so very much, I think music was intrinsically tied to also my development, as a person, my character, growing up through high school.
Yeah, that formative those formative years, having something to grab onto, really helps shape our identity, because it leads us into all of the times that we have free time. We spend it with these sort of people, and it makes us think about the path that we eventually take. And I think that for me, it reminds me of the time that I kind of like was in that music path that early in my life. When you're around
Mhm.
people who are like thinking a little bit more freer, the
Yeah,
patterns kind of dissipate. They go away.
yeah, absolutely. And there was a really amazing kind of scene in place in Flint. It's called the Flint Local 432. And it's, I'm pretty sure, the nation's oldest all ages music venue. And it was so cool because, like, from all the surrounding like high schools and everything, it was a thing. Like, you could start a band and you had this venue and this really supportive scene of, like, just all these different misfits. Like, I can only imagine like pulling, like, kids' parents like pulling up to the club and, like, you look at the outside and there's a bunch of like kids with like spiked jackets and like, crazy hair and like whatever kind of thing. But it was a really, really awesome scene. And the access that we all had to be able to be creative, create something, be exposed to, like, to the support of not only just your friends, but then also the scene that was kind of built in, and be able to build up things from there, in addition to just have fun, was really, really awesome. And, it was such a formative period of my life that, looking back, it absolutely laid the foundation for a lot of things that I'm currently doing, especially when it comes to kind of like organizing and networking and things like that as well.
What'd you do after high school?
After high school, I went to college, and so I went to University of Michigan. But I think by then, it was just, I was just one track mind. I was just so passionate about music, and just, I lived, breathed, ate it. I mean, it was everything, like, to me. And it served me in a lot of really unique ways as well. It wasn't just about, like, having this career and, like, touring and, playing shows and things like that, but also from a personal standpoint for me, it helped me find an outlet for a lot of just sort of like the afflictions that I had, like, growing up. And so, I was, as a kid, I had these, like, kind of, always carried these, like, sort of, anger, like, outbursts and things like that. For the most part, I was a really good kid. And I always meant really well, and was like, just like, always bowed, things like that. But underneath it all, there was definitely something, just something really, really deep, that I never really understood. And it was a lot of things. It was like anger, it was frustration. It was just like, a lot of these, like, really, really sort of like dark emotions and stuff that, for the most part would lay hidden. And then there would be these kind of like triggers and outbursts and things like that. And, I would almost like black out or something. And then I would, like, kind of like, come to or whatever after it all. And then just kind of like see what I did, or be aware of, like, just like the things that I did or said or whatever, things like that. And I would be appalled. It was like so far from who I was and wanted to be as a person. And so in a way, I feel like music kind of laid that foundation where, in a certain aspect, it kind of saved me, I think, because what I found was that through music, I was able to actually express all these intense emotions and feelings, whatever it was that I felt that was, like, bottled up in me. And I had a space and a venue to be able to express all that. But it didn't come, the effect of it was that through a show or, performance or whatever, almost like this alchemy would happen where, like, even though it came from this place of, like, this dark place or whatever, how people would perceive it would be the complete opposite. And people would be inspired and, like, amped up, or, like, whatever. And so for me, it kind of, I guess in the beginning, at least, it served as this process for me to kind of, like, work through, and get a lot of these things out in a very, kind of like safe space. I always like to say that, like, because, like, my style of drumming, especially earlier on, I was just like, just balls to the wall, just super intense, like, threw everything out. Yeah, madman. I would like bleed all over my drums and everything. Like, it was, like, very violent, and, like, just throw everything that I had, at every show. It was like almost like I was going to war or something like that. And it helped me really hone in and kind of laid a sort of foundation for me to actually, take control of those emotions in a certain way. It really laid the basis for me for kind of the rest of my journey of self-discovery as well. I'm 40 years old. I'm the youngest of everything, pretty much. So, like, I think later on in life, I'm starting to understand more about like the older cultures, my, aunts and uncles, my parents, like my grand, and everything as well. So I can only speak to my personal experience, but, I think one aspect of it is this resiliency, of getting through adversity. And, you know, I guess it's not like that we didn't have suffering, like you said. I can take, we can take things from like famines, from like, obviously all these different wars. I mean, with the Japanese, with the Chinese, with, just colonialism. I mean, there's just so much within that where I think even if you look at it as a whole, where, where was there even room for a Vietnamese identity within all? When we're constantly trying to just fight for that identity. We have this huge history between Vietnam and China of like, China, basically coming in, conquering us, then us rising back up. But then what would, historically what would happen was that the best parts, I say that lightly, but like the best parts of, or what we saw that worked for us, such as Confucianism or whatever it was, we'd kick the Chinese out, but then we would take, absorb these kind of like other cultural things as well. And so I think that also speaks to a certain kind of adaptability, and getting back to the resiliency and everything that we have as a culture. But yeah, I see it too. And it's something that I kind of saw in real time as I started to, visit Vietnam and come back every year and everything, and just seeing all the changes, there's clearly so much talent creatively in Vietnam. Like it's insane.
Yeah, today it's arguably, just almost a different group of people than our families, previous generation. It's just,
Yeah,
yeah, it's on fire. I love it. Love to see it.
yeah, it's really cool. But and what I've seen over the years is like, on one end, you know, our creativity, it has been channeled into a lot of copying, and so whether it's like, I'll take, for example, the art studios that are there. You can walk into some of these art studios and you'll see perfect recreations of like all these masterworks, and they're like, and they're just chock full, and you have all these artists just like, recreating all these things, right? um and I remember it was so striking to me because I was like tour some of these places and like hearing about like, the artists and talents and things, and and the biggest question that I had was like, with all this talent, why is it being channeled into, copying masterworks and like doing these things that were already done? Like, where is this outlet for actual self-discovery and like creativity, outside of those kinds of like parameters and everything? And I think you look back at it today, and it's like it's completely starting to shift, especially with all the younger generations and everything, and more exposure to the rest of the world, and the inspiration that comes from that as well. So, it's really complex. Like I don't know if there is an actual like, answer like to that, but I think there is a combination in just kind of like our history, and just how Vietnam has been just this place that has continually been like, conquered and controlled, and that set up against this kind of the culture, and like the Vietnamese people just really fighting to have our own sense of identity, throughout it all. So I think the answer is probably rooted somewhere within there.
Yeah, and I think I'm always looking for the complexity answer, and I think you hit it right in the head. It's like if you're dealing with surviving, there's no other complexity other than finding bread to put on your table.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, because you look at these different movements of like, like the Renaissance or like whatever it is, and like, these all these cultural explosions came from prosperous times. You didn't have to worry about like, food, like, there's strong economies and everything. And so because of these, successes or these strong societies, then the time was created to be able to explore more of these kinds of, art forms and expressions.
it's a good point. So you eventually made your way down to South America, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell me about that journey?
Um, yeah, that's a really, really just talk about complex things. So I'll try to be mindful of time and everything, but ultimately, what came of I guess like my band music life and career was by the end of it, being based in Flint, and we went through, well, basically it was the opioid crisis. They hit Flint first, or it was one of the early places where it hit, and it hit really, really hard. And so, long story short, I was the only one out of my band that wasn't a heroin addict. Um, and so,
Wait. I'm. Let me. That's heavy. You're telling me that all of your band members and the people, I mean, there's always band members coming in and out. There's always people around bands, and you're saying that basically in your world, you're the only one who didn't get caught up in the heroin crisis of that era.
yeah, yeah. I mean, shit got really, really dark. Let's just say that. And yeah, it was a really, really difficult position and time in my life, because these were like, I was in one band this entire time, since high school, and they're my brothers. And as things started to progress and everything, this whole kind of charge of like wanting to save the world with music then turned to wanting to save my brothers through music. And so I went through this whole period where I was like, I did everything. I was like booking all these shows, like those tours, like, just organize everything. I mean, I was basically running and just basically put the band on my back. And in my thought process, at least, I could, grow the band, expose us to like, all these like great things and opportunities and things like that. And somehow that would get them to
Change things.
switch, yeah, change things, whatever it was. It was so hard because like, like the thing that held me for so long was that I didn't want to give up on them. And things got so bad to the point where for the first time ever, like I started to think about things outside of that tunnel vision of sorts. And this is where life starts to kind of lift its veil of sorts. And through a series of just kind of like different events of awakenings of sorts, I started to see life more through the lens of myself. And just my own kind of path of healing and spirituality and self-discovery. And so the more and more that started to open up, and I started having those kind of that dialogue with myself, and the more I started to understand that what I was doing, I was doing it because I just wanted to heal myself. Like I wanted to feel good. I wanted to know that I was helping and everything by helping other people. But at the end of it all, and what really started this whole journey that led me to Peru, was that I needed to heal myself. If I really want to help somebody, then I need to make sure that I'm right, and my spirit's right, and that I'm operating from my heart, not from these ideas or deflecting certain things that I was dealing with at the time onto others and other situations. So that was kind of like the first step in changing that mindset. And it was a really, really interesting time in life, because as my spirituality started to open up and I started to kind of explore these different paths. I mean, there's really no other way to explain it. Like there was like magic basically started happening in my life, and I started feeling, not only feeling, but also seeing connections, to my family, to my ancestors. It really felt like, in particular during this phase, that my grandfather, who I'd never met before, I'd always heard stories about how amazing he was, how creative he was. He was like this, champion calligrapher, He's a medicinal, like a really powerful medicinal healer as well. Had always been like really curious. I'd seen like a couple of photos of him. He looks like a wizard basically,
Wow.
but never
Uh,
really knew anything about
on the
him
lay side or the VU side?
on the lay side.
Of course.
Um, and so yeah, and so
I'm just kidding.
um, no, and it's true. I mean, and that was part of this whole journey. It was just like really understanding and getting to know that side of my family. Yeah, I would say like during this period, I really felt his presence. Like he was helping guide me, like through all this and like leading me in certain directions. Um, so yeah, so all this kind of stuff starts happening. I start going through it all. Like I got really into just like reading, like and studying, just like just different, um, you know, just, I would say just kind of like spiritual people, masters, books, things like that, and just really starting to develop my own connection to it all, and some really amazing things started to happen, and I as I go through this whole process, I started this process of basically analyzing myself, my life, my habits, the things that I'm doing, realizing what really wasn't serving me or my purpose, and then just starting to kind of like let go of these things, or consciously knowing that like I wanted to let go of them, remove them, or heal them, whatever it was. And as I started to do that, like this kind of process opened up to where the things that I would remove from my life, they basically would create more space for these other really beautiful things to kind of come in and help me along with the process. And so by the end of it all, after going through these and just kind of getting all these like really amazing signs, during this period too, like during the darkest part of it all, like I would say for about 5 years or so, like I didn't have dreams anymore. And during this whole process, I started having really vivid dreams. Some were kind of repeating dreams as well, like visions and things like that. And so, during this process, I started dreaming about being in this place. And I was on a mountaintop, and, I'll never forget it. I was like on this mountaintop, and like these like clouds are like, I was so high, like these clouds are like kind of passing through me, and I can feel like, just kind of like, I feel it right now, actually, just like the kind of tingles of like that you get from it all, like the coolness of like clouds and everything. I remember looking across a valley, and there was like another mountain right there that was like even bigger kind of thing. And this dream just kept happening like over and over again. And, I remember one day I was like sitting at my computer, it's like checking my email or something. And, I saw a side banner ad for Peru. And the photo that was used for that ad was this same exact place that was in my dreams. And so I saw that, and it was just like full stop, like, what the heck is going on kind of thing. And, that opened up a whole series of kind of, just events. Like, I don't even want to say coincidences, because they weren't. It was definitely kind of like a kismet kind of thing. Like, I felt like I was being told or called to go to this place. And so during this process, I'm going through all this processing and everything, and I finally come to the decision and to just break up with my family. And I was like, this is it. Like, life is leading to a new path, and I have to leave this behind. And it was one of the most difficult decisions that I had in my entire life. But I did it, and I also realized that how much space the band had taken, in my life, my identity, and everything. And when I finally made that decision to move on, it not only did I feel like so much weight off of me, but also I realized that I had literally moved an ocean's worth of space for this new things to kind of come into. And so, through a series of other events, I ended up going to Peru. I didn't know anybody, didn't even speak Spanish. I just had the opportunity to purchase a ticket, and I did. And left it at that. And so, yeah, that's how I ended up there. So I went without, without any clue other than just kind of this connection to, my grandfather, to like, the universe, and just trying to follow the signs that ended up placing me there.
We're like deep into our interview, and we are both food people, and we have not even talked about food. And what gets me about doing these interviews is that very thing is before people even get to where they need to go in their life, the point where they're starting to do things that are kind of in line with who they are, we go through all of this circuitous paths, right? Like we just go and we're all discovering. And I hope that the young Vietnamese generations and or even young anybody that can hear these stories understand that, it takes a long time to settle into the things that we are meant to be doing. And sometimes what we're meant to do is just almost a transitory rite of passage as well. It's not permanent, and it's just on our journey to dying.
Yeah.
Right? It's just on
You
the
know,
journey
I,
to death.
yeah, I see that in a lot of ways of just like even with relationships as well.
Hmm.
Whether they're long term, short term, whatever. The girlfriend I had at the time, she played a huge role in helping me get to that point, like me understanding my own self-worth, and what I was doing, and the environment, and that I was choosing to place myself in, and that that I that I was worth more, that I was meant to do, you know I don't know if it's like bigger, better things necessarily, but that it wasn't that, this really dark place, that I found myself in. And so, and that relationship, I think, served its purpose, like very specifically,
Yeah.
to help me get to that point. And even when, I think about, my time in South America, I mean, I can literally look back and see how, I met this person that then and had this conversation that then led me to this person that led me here, and then ultimately, I'm having like, a really, really profound, experience where like I'm understanding and peeling back these layers of myself. So yeah, I think that's a really, really great point. Is like, it is that nothing is forever. It is this kind of, some things are kind of transitory, but that is the embrace and acceptance of that, I think,
Yeah.
is something that we as human beings um, have a lot of difficulty in, because we want to maintain things, we grasp for things, and we don't want to let go.
I have to circle back to the band members. Do you know how they've all ended up?
Yeah, yeah, I still keep in touch with them. Unfortunately, one passed. The others are actually doing really well. They were able. It was their own, like, journey and everything. But yeah, they're they made it to the other side, so to speak. And yeah, one of them still is an amazing musician, and he's still, on that path, and he's amazing. Has this amazing career as a musician. Um, Others just kind of like, just stepped out of it, and started to do just different things. So.
Yep. And before we get into the food stuff, I want to address the whole Flint, or not even address it. I have a lot of questions about
Mhm.
Flint and the water crisis, and you know, how has Flint changed in the last decade or so with all the adversity?
Um, it's changed a lot. Things are definitely brighter in Flint. There's a lot more economic activity and development. I think more importantly, there's a lot of, it could be better, but there's more opportunities for the community to actually lay claim to, to our city, and express themselves as well. Um, you know, in a way, I feel like this whole resiliency that we talk about, like it's so alive here and connected here in Flint as well. Um, you know, I think, we come up in blips because, if it's not the murder capital, and it's like, like auto industry stuff, and then it's like the water crisis, like, all these things. But, at the end of the day, like, the people are here, the community's here. Like, we have, gotten through all these things because of like the strength and the bonds of the community. We look out for each other. And, while everybody sees Flint as this place where it's like, it needs to be saved, we don't need saving as a community. We just need opportunities. There's such an amazing, like, built-in like hustle and like grit to people who are from Flint, and survivalism, and a lot of creativity too. Like, I always make the joke that, like, in Flint, the same person that, fixes your car, can also do plumbing, can also, do your electrical work, and then is probably your weed dealer as well. And so there is this amazing hustle, in Flint, where everybody just like does whatever it takes, to survive, and they end up finding themselves in all these different capacities because of that.
Yeah, and it's awesome to hear you you have such love for that resiliency because it's very easy to label ourselves as Vietnamese and Viet pride and all of this stuff, but there's more to just that idea of being Vietnamese because you are a Vietnamese who is very attached to your community in Flint. And the beauty of that is like, all these big cities, New Yorkers or Angelinos, are always, East Coast, West Coast, but there's another Tony Vu somewhere in Brazil or another part of the world that is very attached to their community and doing big things in their community and being part of the fabric of the community. And I am so proud to hear that, that you've connected and you're taking care of it's just people, right? Just people that you are taking care of in your community. And I think that that's so such an amazing thing that you can say, you know what, this is the most important aspect of living is the people around us.
Oh yeah, and everybody in Flint gets it too. Like, as much as I take care of the community also takes care of me.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes this place so special, is that the strength and the bonds within the community that exists here. It's really incredible, and it doesn't exist in many places, at least as far as I've seen from a citywide level. Everybody's so supportive of what anybody is doing here, and we all just want each other to succeed and win in life. And it's a really, really incredible place, like, especially coming from this sort of baseline of just kind of like suffering and everything. I joke with some of my friends sometimes, and it's it almost seems like everybody in Flint is in some way, shape, or form like broken, right? And we all really connect on that, and we all uplift each other, because we see each other authentically, kind of as community members, as brothers and sisters, and it's a really, really amazing community to be a part of.
Before I started the podcast, I had read different articles about you years ago, and your work. And always when you see a Vietnamese name, you're so proud. I'm so proud of it always. You've done a lot. The footprint of what you've done in Flint is a lot. So I don't know how to unpack this right now, but we got to find a way to start the story from, I guess, leaving Peru to now you going on to your journey in the food space.
Yeah, so my whole journey in Peru, it really kicked off this 5-year period of intense self-discovery. And prior to this, I had no inclination to even try to do anything with food. I love food. My mom's food is amazing, just like every other Vietnamese mom's. But my mom's food is like really, really incredible. And so I've always had a love for food. And, my family did have a restaurant growing up. I was just a little kid, just kind of like bumped around everything as well. But, I never really saw myself like, cooking like that by any means. And so, so I guess like starting with Peru, it was really this huge step in my life to really take accountability for myself, and just put more work and effort into myself and understanding myself, and ultimately my development. And some really amazing things happened there. Like I had so many cool experiences. I ended up like mountain climbing, and to kind of circle back to this whole vision that I had with Peru. I went to that place. I found myself in a small town called Pisac, which is in the Sacred Valley. It's just not too far from Cusco. And I remember being there, and there's like one of the last kind of like fully intact ruins that isn't Machu Picchu is sits at the top of there. And so I remember going up there with a friend that I had met. He was telling me about this place, and like, let's go. So we had plans. Went up there in the morning, hiked all the way to the top, and when we get to the top and kind of walk around, and like we get to the ruins and like going through, and then all of a sudden I look up and it hits me, and I'm standing there, and the clouds are passing through me, and I look across, and there's that mountain, and it was just this it's indescribable, but it was a place where like time, space, everything stopped, and somehow I just felt whole. And I was shocked at first, but then also I felt like I belonged. Like it was just something where I remember just like smiling and just being like, wow, there really is magic in this world.
Wow.
And so that kind of, led me, especially with being in the mountains as well,
Yeah.
to really pursue this kind of, discovery and philosophy of being up there. And so I got really, really into mountain climbing, and it just kept going higher and higher, and just got so many amazing life lessons and everything from it all as well. Just when you're up there and you're just like a speck, and like you're in the shadows of these like massive, like powerful, like mountains. It really puts a lot of things into perspective of like what actually matters. At least in that space. And so I was able to experience a lot of that, and I think it allowed me to also kind of zoom back and just like really look at life and all the possibilities and purpose, and just like all these kinds of things, and really just kind of reflect and draw upon those as inspiration. And so did Peru, and had this incredible experience, and ended up coming back. And then I think a month later, I ended up going to Vietnam for the first time. And that was really, really incredible for me, because I had this idea, for one, that, basically, so growing up, and I think this is kind of like a shared thing, is, I had this kind of identity crisis of sorts, particularly with my situation, like grew up in Millington, like, just not being surrounded by much of an Asian community, let alone Vietnamese. Growing up in a musical world where like, you're looked at as an Asian, and just kind of like, you're escalated, and just kind of like, it's kind of, like, what are you doing here kind of thing. And then I would play, and then all of a sudden you just be like, oh, you're cool now, I can talk to you kind of thing, So it was just like, it was always like me, like trying to prove myself, and self-worth, and who I was, and things like that. So I always had this idea in my head that like I would go to Vietnam, the motherland, I'd be with my people, and I would finally, like, I don't know what I thought, but like some red carpets being thrown, rolled out, and like be embraced as like, coming home as a son or something like that, right? And I get there, and everybody thinks that I'm like either like mixed French or Japanese. And I speak Vietnamese to people, and they're just like, oh, you speak such good Vietnamese. I'm just like, I am Vietnamese. They're like, no, you're not, like, kind of thing. And by that point, for me, it was like, I realized just kind of just how insignificant to me, at least, the weight that I was putting on this sense of like identity and belonging.
Wow.
Because by then I had gone through so many different life experiences, was able to meet so many different people, and just had like have all these like really amazing connections, that I realized that I'm actually like, I'm me. Like I'm a child of the world. I can get along with, pretty much anybody, fit in pretty much like, anywhere and in any situation. And to me, that was like kind of like the big cosmic joke of sorts, where it was just like, you're fine. Like, stop stressing about it, man. And so that was huge. And what I can say is that throughout this all as well, I did have a lot of really profound experiences based around food. First in Peru, I'll never forget one of the big ones was, I was trying to find this kind of like, this mystical waterfall of sorts. Like, I was in the jungle in the Amazon, and it was against all the advice of all the locals. Like, I just wanted to go out and try to find it on my own. It was like an 8 hour hike to get there, and I was like, I could do it, whatever. So here I am, 10 hours later, and I'm lost in the jungle. And so I remember coming up to this kind of like river crossing, and I stopped to eat some food that I had packed, and it was basically in this place where I was like, man, like, I just need to get back. And I think by that time too, like this sort of dialogue had opened up with the jungle. When you're in the jungle like that, and there's no civilization or anything, and you're just literally just surrounded by this wild world or kingdom, where a million things surrounding you can kill you, and a million things can probably heal you as well. It's just this dialogue kind of starts to open up, and these different senses start to open up as well, and you start to kind of like see things differently, hear things differently. It becomes very intuitive as well. And so, I'm sitting at this kind of stream crossing, eating a sandwich, and like finally gets to the point where I realized how stupid I was. And so I basically apologized to the jungle, and basically asked for a safe passage for like a way back. And when I say that, out of the corner of my eye, I see this like black blob that like comes, and it just goes, hits my ponytail, and then it goes off. And then it was so quick, it was just like that. And then as I processed it, what I realized was that it was an eagle that came through, like grabbed my tail, and then went that way. And I remember the first thing that entered my head when that contact happened was go this way. And so like happens, and then I'm like process it and put it together, and I was like, wait, what? And so realized that was that was the answer. And so I followed the river across that way, leads me out of the jungle back to this, to kind of like a trail. Follow the trail, and then I ended up getting coming upon this campesino, which is like kind of like a farm. And I see this lady there that's like knitting something out of weave, and she sees me, and so naturally it's just like I'm probably like all haggard and everything, and so she's like comes out, and she's trying to talk to me. I'm trying to speak to her in broken Spanish. She speaks Quechua because she's like indigenous. And not really much is like being is being communicated. But then she looks at me and she points, she's like, and like that. And I was like, universal language. I was like, yeah, of course I would love some food. She's like, come here. So I go inside of her hut, and sit down on the dirt floor, and she like lays out this spread of like plantains and like fish and like potatoes, and I'm just like, it's beautiful. It's like I'm just eating this like beautiful food, being like poured with a lot of energy and love and everything. And during this whole time, we're just chatting back and forth. And even though we're just like it's using like our own words or whatever, we were laughing like in stitches, just like saying things, communicating. It was really, really surreal. Somehow we had found a way to communicate, basically. And by the end of it all, I don't know if she knew that I was trying to get back to like whatever, but she kind of like points me on my way, and I like follow her directions, and it gets me back to the village that I came from. And so for me, that was kind of one of the first really profound experiences where I saw the transcendental power of food, and just how it could, really just break down barriers, whether it was like culturally, language, whatever it was. And so that was kind of like the first morsel of sorts that I got that kind of led me on to other experiences in life. The other part would be, going to Vietnam, obviously, and experiencing all the food there and all the joy and everything that comes from it all. Meeting my cousins that I didn't even know existed from my father's, first marriage, and meeting them, hearing their stories, understanding, the struggles and everything that they went through, seeing their personalities, how creative they were, how happy they were as well, and just like, being brought into that world and like sharing, these conversations and love like over meals. It left such a huge impact on me, and my heart, and just how I saw that was expressed through food. That by the end of it all, after 5 years and just like, going through, a number of these types of experiences, I kept coming back every winter. And I would just, I was doing IT contracting at the time. And then, it was just a way to kind of, get through. But knowing that I wanted to do something else, like something bigger was at play, and like just kind of over time, I wouldn't even say it was a decision. It was like another one of those things where like doors were open and I just chose to walk through them. And that's how I got started. I basically bought a food truck without any experience, never really worked in a restaurant or anything before as well. Worked on it for a summer, and then armed with my mom's recipe and even her help, like starting it off, just kind of hit the ground running.
Before we even get into that journey with the food truck, I want to ask you about ceremony
Mm-hmm.
in Peru because I feel like the stories that you talk about have a lot to do with magic and this idea of allowing ourselves to be open to this spiritual side that is not related to Christianity or Buddhism, our typical religions in Vietnam. There are different parts of South American spiritual practices. And I think that you and I have talked about you having experience in the idea of ceremonies and whatnot. And can you tell me about the magical side of these ceremonies in Peru?
Yeah. So, I had kind of, you know, um, laid the groundwork, I guess, to enter more of that spiritual and kind of older ceremonial, like ancient, like kind of world of that. And so, when I got to Peru for the first time, I had one contact that had set me up with somebody that they knew, and ended up staying with them. And from them, they had set me up with some of their friends to just kind of like hang out, like whatever. And this group of friends were very much so from that world of spirituality, of plant medicine and everything. And we started having these conversations.
And you had never done anything before. You never was part of that world before.
Well, not in the ceremonial sense. I guess prior to this, I had dabbled in, psychedelics and everything, and kind of had an affinity of sorts, especially when it comes to kind of, the expansive aspects and the creativity and things that come from that all. But this was something completely different, and I gained obviously a profound respect for working with consciousness when you enter these kinds of realms, and the responsibility that really comes with it, and how it ties into these bigger pictures of spirituality and connection and things. And so I basically just started meeting people, and like we'd have conversations, and one thing would lead to another, and like there were more aspects of even more self-discovery, and that's what actually led me to Cusco. So I got to Cusco and met some more people as well, and basically I was just started getting connected to this larger world um, of ceremony. And so when I was in Cusco, and it was almost like a weird like vetting process of sorts. And this really interesting thing happened. Like when and with that group, and when I first came to Peru, they basically told me that there was somebody that I would meet in Cusco, that I needed to go there, and that she was like my sister basically. And I remember going there with this thought of like, I have to find this person or whatever kind of thing. And, you know, through these different meetings and contacts and, the network and everything, I end up at this shop. There's a few shaman kind of like shops in Cusco and Pisac. So I was in Pisac, and was talking to the shop owner, who was a shaman, and we just start chatting and everything. And I think right off the bat, like she was a sesame of sorts, and opened herself up a little bit more. Asked me to come around like later and everything, and I guess like I passed some kind of test, whatever it was, and in the end, she invited me to do an ayahuasca ceremony. And so, the evening comes of the ceremony, and I get there, and there's like a small group that's just kind of like waiting around to be let in, and I see this girl named, and it's Claudia, and immediately when we get there, we just kind of like look at each other, and like there's instantly some kind of like weird whatever connection kind of thing, and we end up chatting, and I tell her, I was like, I think I was supposed to like meet you or something, and she's like basically said the same thing. She was like, yeah, like there's something weird is like going on here, and I end up in the ceremony that night, and that entire ceremony, it was a group of I think about 5 people, and essentially that entire ceremony became about me. And the 5 people that were in there were there to support me through this whole process of really going into the core of like just whatever my demons were and everything, whatever my affliction and everything were. And they were there. There was like 3 other shamans in addition to that, and they were all there to support me on this kind of like transition of sorts, and journey for me to get to the other side. And this was the culmination of everything that I went through from the time that I broke up with the band, and ended up in Peru, and trying to find like a new beginning, whatever it was. And this is a whole nother podcast as far as like what happened with them at all. But what I can tell you is that by the end of it all, I remember, I was in a boat of sorts, and I remember laying down, and it was death. Like I had a spiritual death of sorts. I remember laying down, like passing through this dark tunnel. There was like firelights and everything, and then I get to the other side, and everything opens up, like the sea or whatever, and then like I sit back up again, and I look, and I see myself heading towards Vietnam, which is where I ended up a month later, and understood the family side of myself, and that story, and how it weaved into so many of these things that I felt growing up, and just how it was all connected. And it gave me, an understanding that it wasn't just me, that I wasn't just like, this person with all this anger or whatever it was, that there was actually a lot of suffering throughout my family, and that it was all interconnected.
I've challenged religion growing up, the spirituality of theory of spirituality, and and this is a very superficial challenge, because the rejection of Catholicism, from my experiences, overshadowed so much other people's experiences or ideas of spirituality. So when I think about like your experience and your family and who they are, and it's very different from ending up in Peru in an ayahuasca ceremony, and the beautiful lineage of the work that your family does, and it's very different from ending up in Peru getting a message that's, could be considered very woo-woo, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is all like, but there's a reality that comes from all of those sensations that you feel in the vibrations of coming out of the ceremony. And I've gone through an ayahuasca ceremony as well, and it's something that is a very real thing, but at the same time, there's a lot of interpreting that you have to kind of do to get to the other side. Um, so I want to ask you, did you arrive at these interpretations in just one shot, or was there a series of these things that made you ultimately believe in the direction that you were going into?
It was definitely a series of things. I think that some of these epiphanies of sorts were concentrated around the ceremonies, but you know, it's so much of it is it is subjective,
Yeah.
and from one aspect, I could look at it and as the experiencer of it all, and it was magic, and it was amazing, and like you become one with the universe. You see everything. You see your past lives. It's very just kind of like mystical and everything, and that's really real. Like I went through that. Like I experienced it all. On the other end, I can kind of look back at it as well, and it's just like, well, clearly I was under this influence. There's like all these other aspects like that were involved, and so for me, what I think, one is it's your personal journey of it all, and it's not necessarily like a solution. Let's say
Yeah.
it's a tool, and you don't need ayahuasca to be able to do these things. You don't need to be in ceremony. You definitely don't need to go to Peru to like to put yourself on a path to heal yourself or understand yourself in these ways. It's definitely not for everybody either. You know, I, I mean, I had a hard time reconciling it because, like, especially when you spend so much time, in this world of sorts of like mysticism, magic, and all these things, and I'm like, climbing mountains and all this stuff, and like having all these epiphanies. When I would come back, I would say that I was like drunk on the light. Like, I was like, bless this, bless that. Like, I could not, I there was very few people that I could actually talk to and sound like I was at least somewhat sane, because I was just so far removed from like the shared world that everybody else kind of is in. And so what that taught me was that this was for me, and yes, I can share it. And to be honest, this is really the first time I've ever shared it, at least to
Wow.
this capacity, with an outside world. Like, but it is your own journey. It's your own story, and it's meant for you. And for me, what I saw was that through these experiences, I was led to this sort of crossroads of spirituality and creativity. These worlds, these things came from my ability to connect them. Obviously, one from like, just my mind, and just like, these sorts of worlds and instances and things like that. Like that all comes from me. That's all from within here. And my ability to connect those experiences to these larger aspects of life, family, work, whatever it is, trauma, things like that. that's what I did. And that's how I was able to make sense not only of that experience, but then life as a whole. You could probably, or at least some people probably could, at least get a similar kind of resolution by seeing a therapist or something, whatever it is, whatever your path is. You could do yoga, you could start meditating, whatever, there's a number of ways to access these things, but I think, it's different for everybody. And, for me, and I don't want to say struggle with it, but, to be able to live that kind of life and be that entrenched in that world, but then also now pull out and be very much so in this life and society and everything, but still try to maintain those connections. It's a struggle, but it's always there. And really what it is, and the X factor in all is that it's you. All of that comes from you. And if I've learned anything, I've learned like how capable the human spirit is, how resilient it is, and how it can actually, we don't give ourselves enough credit for, I think most of us don't give ourselves enough credit for what we're actually capable of.
As I listen to you, I think about how shitty it is to be a second generation Vietnamese. And here's what I mean. These things that we go through, how can we explain this to our parents? The depth of being drunken on the light, that concept of like being drunk on the light of being in Peru and all the magic and having it articulated to your mom and dad at some point, because I come out of a retreat and my wife goes to the retreat. We call it a retreat, and that's the only thing that we can say. It's just a retreat. But we can't talk about the intricacies of the structure of what's going on at these ceremonies. And that's a shitty part about being second. So when I look at my children, I pray to some spiritual being out there that it does not happen to myself and my children, that we lose a generation of communication as a result of the language or this barrier to say, fuck it. We just have to be able to be fiercely open and candid about our experiences. And I hope that we can inspire ourselves to either push it out with our children and the third generation, or reverse it and try to push it back upwards with our parents. Because the beauty of hearing these stories from you and people like you is that there's this other way of being, this other completely different way of seeing, because the Vietnamese, we have our culture and then we have Buddhism and Catholicism, and that's sort of like the limit of where we kind of experience life in those frameworks.
Yeah, and what I could say is that, maybe it's okay to not be able to explain the whole story. I mean, you're right. How do you? I will never be able to fully articulate what I went through, especially in like one shot or like, a book or something like that. I mean, I can do my best for sure.
Yeah.
But there aren't enough words in all the languages combined to even begin to be able to paint that full picture, because it hits on so many different levels and layers, of your own being, of your existence, of your history, of your family, whatever it is. And, that's something that I had to try to reconcile. And what I realized through that all is that some of that is just for me. That's my story. And like, I can share it with certain people or whatever, but, all of it's going to be just fragments of the greater thing. And I think really, to me, that's what life is. If you pull it all the way back, we're all connected.
Yeah.
We're all born from this same thing, whatever it is. It's like, there's no separation. I mean, you can look at it, spiritually, you can look at it from science with like, just straight up like molecules, whatever, like we're all this, we're all connected, right? The beauty of it all is that we can actually articulate these things in different ways. And the story might not, come across, and then and people not find a connection. Not everyone might not find a connection to it, but certain people will. And I think ultimately that's what this notion of God, or the universe, or whatever it is, whatever your name for it is, that's all we can do is try to explain this big vast expanse of the shared experience through our fragments that we own and that we know, whether it's through a poem, through a mathematical equation, a song, a piece of art. We're all pulling from that same collective
Source.
energy source, and we're explaining it, and we're articulating those stories, with our gifts and our abilities. And to me, that's where, this confluence of like science, religion, whatever it is, we're all trying to explain the same thing. How do things work? Why do they work? You can look at it through God, or you can look at it through theories, whatever, computations, whatever it is. And so I think part of it for me, at least, was just owning that and knowing that, I have a lot of stories to tell, and they don't just have to come through one sitting of a podcast. There's also different ways to express it. I express my journey to greater masses through food, and through trying to help other people find themselves. They're going to do it in their food identities. They're going to do it through a different process that I did, obviously. But in the end, what I got from all of that is a place where I can be free and authentically myself. And that's all that I want, really, for the world.
That's so crazy because when people will hit the download, or to check out this episode, they'll just see a bunch of food stuff, right, from a person named Tony Vu, right? And it's just, they're probably going into it expecting that we're going to hear all this food stuff, this food journey, and for the 90% of the whole episode, we've been talking about this journey that eventually ends up in your food expression. And what you just said is the way that people will experience your experience is through the food that they eat. And that's such a beautiful, beautiful idea.
Yeah, it's I'm really lucky, and I'm really grateful to be able to have that expression, and I still love music. And, I think through drumming, I learned how to tap into my creativity, and I see life through rhythms and everything as well. And at the end of the day, I cook like I drum. I draw from that same source. I have those same rhythms that are in it all. I find the same joy and everything out of it. So, we're not one-dimensional beings. You look at somebody, and there's a projection of something, but then that projection to you is completely different than who they are as a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, a friend, so on and so forth. So, it's really just, for me, I just love all those different aspects of things, and that's really what makes us unique. And it's just, how can you articulate those things?
Yeah.
When sat down, coming back, I was able to actually have that conversation with my mom, and she kind of got it. With my dad, it was very different. I didn't explain to him what I, just like what I explained to my mom, let's say. But what I did, the conversation I did have with him, was just the understanding that I got about our relationship of us all. And so I sat down with him, chatted with him about our lives together as father and son. And I felt, so much love, and just this thing that I guess I don't know if I felt like I was missing or whatever, but it just filled me with this immense sense of love, for my father and from my father. I did the same thing with my sister too. And so it doesn't have to be all one shot. You don't have
Yeah.
to just put the cliff notes out there or anything. It's like, it's something that will stick with you, and you'll continue to learn from, and, hopefully, you just do your best.
We left off when we were trying to get into the food details at the food truck. But since time is a little bit limited, I want to see if we can attempt to talk about from the minute you got the food truck to today, sort of like that journey, if you will, in a few minutes as we're closing out the episode. And then maybe perhaps in another episode, a few months later, we can talk about, we can pick up where the food truck is. I'm sorry, for your operations, your food operations, and really get into that in a separate episode. But I do want to hear from the point that you got the food truck and how it developed into where you are today.
Yeah. So with the food, I found that through food, that was the best way for me to kind of articulate, my experience, like everything that I learned that I wanted to so badly share with the world. I found that was going to be the best vehicle to do that, the most accessible, and also because of the impacts that food had on me as well. So, I just thought, like I said, on a whim, I found a really cheap, like, beater food truck. It was like a 1959, like, Ford, like, step van that used to be like an Italian hoagie truck or something. Fixed it up for a summer with my friends, and was able to run it for, like, I think, like, maybe like a week or two or something. And it went really well. Like, people were, like, super excited and really supportive. So then shut it down for the winter, and then came back for the next summer, ran a whole season with it. And, it was incredible, just the amount of support and excitement that the community had for it. And, I started off just because my limitations and everything, so I had a really small menu. I was basically just doing banh mi sasiu, and then I would do like banh quan, or like, just like different random specials and stuff like there. But mainly it was banh mi. And knowing all this time that, I was holding pho in my back pocket, because I knew how good it was, how good my mom's recipe, or at least where it was. And I knew that as soon as, like, I kind of, like, would as soon as I served it, that it was just going to open up a whole another, a whole other beast of sorts. So I held on to that until the very end. I think it was like November or something, and it was getting a little bit colder. So I decided to do pho.
Serve it out of the truck?
Serving out of the truck.
Wow.
And lo and behold, lines all the way across the market. I mean, it was just massive, really successful. Couldn't even keep up. Learned a lot. This whole thing was trial by fire, and it finally got to, I think, December. And I put an announcement out that I was, shut it down for the season because I was going to travel again. And the whole community was just like up in arms, just like, no, please don't, kind of thing. So I held on to it and actually served through, like, snowstorms with, like, lines of people standing in the snow, just like wanting to get fun and everything.
Wow.
And I served up until I think 2 days before I left to go back to Peru. And so did that, shut it down. And then the following year, because of the success, and the farmers market had moved to this brand new, beautiful facility, they offered me a spot inside there. And so out of the food truck, MaMang, which is the name of the food stall, was born. And so, and it's been a crazy ride. That was, I think, 8 years ago now. And, we opened up there, and within the first 3 months of being there, I was on the Food Network. It was just, everything just kind of, like, took off, basically. Again, trial by fire, learning everything. I was just, like, working crazy hours, just trying to keep up with everything. And, through the rest of the year, I kind of figured it out, and had this really solid, like, workflow and system and everything down. And so did that. And, through the course of the next couple of years, like, I had a bunch of, like, kind of like carrots dangled in my front of my face, of, like, people wanting me to open up in Grand Rapids, or, like, open up here, or partner here, this, there, whatever kind of thing. And, the whole time for me, I just, there were just all opportunities for me to really just kind of, like, analyze situations, really just kind of dig into myself and my purpose and, like, why I was doing these things. and then ultimately, realized that these weren't the things that like were kind of serving what I was trying to do with food. And so I was turning them down. Also during this time, because I was in the food world now, I was hanging out with other chefs and everything. We would get together and just kind of have like drinks like after our shifts and things like that. And never forget it, but like they we would sit around and it was just like this round table with the chefs just talking about how much they hated working at their places, and how much they hated this chef and like this chef, and they would all bounce around these different kitchens and stuff, and it just sounds so freaking awful and like toxic. And I remember just being there, just bewildered, and like finally I asked him, I was like, "Well, this sounds horrible. You're like, why are you guys doing this? Like, this sounds like it sucks." And they all just kind of chuckle and they're just like, "This is how it is, man." They're all super passionate about cooking, and wanted to cook the food that they want to cook, but like this was the setup, the culture, and everything, and they just kind of sat and ate it. And I remember right then and there making the decision that I would never run an establishment that was like that. And from there, I was on a mission basically to change everything. And so that summer, I think, or fall, I started Flint Social Club, and started it as a pop-up series as a way for my chef friends to be able to cook the food that they wanted. I leveraged my relationships and infrastructure with MaMang, community partnerships and everything as well, and basically had a sponsored pop-up series. I think we did 5 of them or something, each one featuring a different chef and the food that they wanted to do. And once again, the community came out, all of them sold out. It was like, it's awesome, super fun, massive success. And throughout the following year after that, I kept getting hit up by all these people that saw it and just like, man, like I want to do something. I don't know how to do it. Like, I want to get their foot in or whatever it was. And so then the following years, my chef friends and I turned into mentors. And we would take on, people from the community that wanted to, get into the food world, and we would do pop-ups with them. Each year kind of grew a little bit larger and bigger and everything. And, that was kind of like the starting point of how Flint Social Club, how Flint Social Club started. Parallel to this, I think 3 years after I had been running MaMang, I was outreached by an old high school friend who was up in Traverse City. And he said that he had a client that was looking to open a Vietnamese restaurant up there. And she was asking if I wanted to come up and consult. So I was like, yeah, sure. So I made a trip to go up there and met someone named Soon Haggerty. She's a Vietnamese person. And she, she's also from Southern California as well. And she was in Traverse City and, had worked in marketing for like the auto industry. She's like really successful and everything, but she had always had this desire to open up a Vietnamese restaurant. She wanted to do it as a nonprofit because she really wanted to be able to leverage our culture and our food to be able to do good. And so I get up there and I meet her, and basically within the first hour, so many things of like our stories and our family history and everything aligned to where we realized that we really wanted to get, to do this together. So we created the Good Bowl, and the business model that helps the community there. And so the model is that $1 from every bowl is donated to a local, national, or global charity. We switch up the charities every quarter, and the community gets to vote on which ones. And I can say really proudly that over the past 3.5 years, we've raised over $100,000, mostly for local charities that we've given away. In addition to that, we came together on the fact that we really wanted to create a good working culture, combat the toxicity of the food industry, and definitely have been successful to build a really amazing crew that offers a lot of care and respect and dignity to one another. We're employee first kind of establishment, and believe that if we treat employees well, then that will translate to happy food and happy customer service. And it was this really kind of amazing thing. Like really what we connected on was that, we're both refugees. Our families are refugees. She came over on a boat in the second wave. Her family was able to, come to Southern California and just, build up this really amazing, kind of produce like company. And, they were really successful. And she was really grateful for the opportunity and the open embrace that America had for her family. And obviously was for my family as well. So, for us, we kind of articulated as this was kind of like our thank you to America for giving our family this opportunity, and we wanted to do good by it. So yeah, that's where kind of like my all my businesses and everything kind of entail. The Good Bowl is still going really strong. We're still at the farmers market and with MaMang, and kind of this next phase of life for me is really delving more into the nonprofit side of things, which Flint Social Club officially organized as last year. And yeah, we're just out here to be able to do good and to provide, the same opportunities basically that were afforded to myself and my family. Just make sure that those continue.
Your journey is inspiring to me, and I thank you so much for sharing so much of the details of the things that you've gone through to get to the point that you are today. So once again, thank you for coming on and sharing.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
We'll talk soon, Tony. Thank you again.
All right, thanks, good. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Vietnamese with Kenneth Nguyen. The Vietnamese is produced by Brittany Tran. Special thanks to Jane Nguyen, Catherine Nguyen, Tina Pham, Sydney Jamie, and Christo Trin. Please find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at The Vietnamese Podcast. You can also find us on YouTube, where you can subscribe, like, and comment. Please rate and give us a review wherever you find our podcasts. Thanks again for listening.